All right. This round has started, and let me just change the host back. All right, you can begin. Thank you so much.
All right, next case on the civil docket is Joey Petrillo as administrator of the estate of Genesis Petrillo versus Harper Martini and Peony Estates. We will start with appearances and then move into housekeeping matters. I will hear from the plaintiff's side first.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Travis Pico, and I'm joined here today by my co-counselors, Ms. Addison Pruitt.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
And Mr. Matthew Schreiner.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
And together, we are advocating on behalf of the estate of Mr. Genesis Petrillo. Your Honor, seeing this is our first time in your court, I'd first like to inquire, what are your preferences regarding sitting or standing during statements?
Given the circumstances of these proceedings, I will allow counsel to sit or stand, whatever is preferable for them.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, we would like to invoke Rule 615, constructively sequestering all witnesses, barring party representation. For this trial, we do not have a party representative.
Does the defense have any objection to constructively sequestering witnesses under 615?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. The witnesses will be constructively sequestered.
At this time, we'd also like to invoke Rule 603, which is just the pre-swearing of all witnesses.
Okay. We will allow that under 603.
Now, Your Honor, we'd like to turn your attention to some case law relevant in today's case, the first being Burdett versus Copenhagen, which states the elements of civil battery are first, an act by the defendant, second, an intent to cause harmful or offensive contact on the part of the defendant, and third, harmful or offensive contact to the plaintiff. The second is Defendifer versus Schroeder, which simply states that a plaintiff in a civil case must establish all the elements of its claim by a preponderance of an evidence, meaning that all elements are more likely than not true.
Okay.
The last, we would like to draw your attention to Stipulation 9, which states that all other food and drink on the night of June 7th was tested, and none of that food tested positive for organophosphates.
Okay. Stipulation 9 is noted.
With that, the state is ready to proceed.
Okay. Now I will hear introductions and any additional housekeeping matters from the defense.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon. My name is Cooper Attic, and I, along with my co-counsel, Micah Porter.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
And Lillian Giles.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Will be representing the defendant in today's case, Harper Martini. Now, we would like to offer a few more housekeeping matters. First, we'd like to constructively tender the intent to alter character evidence to Your Honor.
You would? Can you explain?
Can I? This document basically says that the defense will offer an opinion or reputation evidence attacking the character for truthfulness of the following witnesses on the character evidence form. I can share it with you now, Your Honor.
Okay.
And both parties have seen and signed this.
Okay. I understand. Thank you.
And I would also like to draw your attention to the pretrial order that states that today will be a bifurcated trial, meaning that the only evidence that is relevant in today's case has to do with liability and not damages.
Okay. Noted. We will not be addressing damages today.
And with that,
go ahead.
And with that, the defense is ready to move to opening statements.
Okay. I apologize. The last question I have for the plaintiff side of the case, will you be pursuing a battery theory or negligence per se?
Battery, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you. Now that we have taken introductions and addressed housekeeping matters, the plaintiff side may proceed with opening statements.
Opening, Your Honor. May it please the court. Every parent's wish is that their child will meet someone that loves them, cherishes them, and makes all of their dreams come true. You raise your son or daughter from the time they take their very first steps, encouraging them so that one day they can leave the nest. That is, most parents. In 2012, two young people met and fell in love. Genesis Petrillo was a young PhD candidate just trying to make his way in life. And when he met Casey Soto, a young girl from Midlands, they fell in love. They started introducing each other to friends and family, and a couple of years later, they got engaged. They had plans to get married and then move to France, a plan that Casey's overprotective mother, Harper, was not a fan of. Ladies and gentlemen, today you're going to hear about a parent who didn't want her child to leave the nest. You'll hear that Harper wanted Casey to stay and take over the family business, a winery named Peony Estates. The tension between Harper and Genesis built in the months leading up to the wedding, and things came to a head the night of the rehearsal dinner. The evidence will show that on that night, Harper decided to take things into her own hands. In the year or so leading up to the wedding, the winery had begun to use a particularly lethal brand of pesticides to deal with their insect infestations, allegedly. I want you to pay attention to where that pesticide actually ends up. You'll see on the night before the wedding, Harper made a toast to Genesis. She took a bottle of wine and presented it to him. A bottle of wine that later tested positive for containing pesticides. Instead of having her dream wedding on June 8th, Casey had to go to the hospital in her wedding dress and receive the news that the love of her life had passed away. Because you see, Harper had a problem, she had a plan, and she had a poison. You're going to hear from 3 witnesses today who will tell you about the events leading up to and following the night of July 7th, 2019. First, we will be calling Angel Rodriguez, a close friend of the couple. She'll tell you that Genesis was afraid of Harper, afraid of what she might be planning. Next, you'll hear from Dr. Jimin Kwan, the attending physician the night that Genesis came to the emergency room, exhibiting symptoms of pesticide poisoning. Dr. Kwan will tell you that every single test he ran confirmed his suspicions. Pesticides. Finally, you'll hear from Casey Soto herself, the defendant's daughter, the bride. Casey will tell you that the defendant repeatedly threatened Genesis in the days leading up to the wedding. She'll tell you about the heartbreak that she's experienced after losing the love of her life. Today, we represent the estate of Genesis Petrillo, seeking justice for a life that should have been. As the plaintiff, we bear the burden of proof in today's case. We must prove to you by a preponderance of the evidence, meaning more likely than not, that Harper committed battery against Genesis Petrillo, which ultimately led to his death. Now, according to case law Burdett v. Copenhaver, battery has 3 elements that we must prove today. Those 3 elements are an act by a defendant with intent to cause harmful or offensive contact, and the 3rd element is that harmful or offensive contact. The evidence will show that we will meet that burden and more. And it's for this reason that at the end of today's trial, my co-counsel, Mr. Matthew Schreiner, will come before you and ask that you find Harper Martini liable because she had a problem, she had a plan, and she used the poison. Thank you.
Defense counsel may proceed with their opening statement.
May it please the court. Harper Martini just wanted peace. It is June 7th, 2019. Casey Soto, Harper's only child, is getting ready for her wedding to Genesis Petrillo the next day. Harper's been doing everything she can to help get ready for the wedding, but admittedly, tensions have been running high. But you will learn today that Harper just wanted peace. Unfortunately, she never got that peace because Genesis stayed up drinking the night before his wedding with his friend Angel Rodriguez. And then things took a turn for the worse. Genesis Petrillo got very sick and had to be taken to the hospital. The doctors did all they could, but unfortunately, Genesis passed away. What you will learn today is that we do not know why. But the plaintiff is here today blaming Harper Martini. The plaintiff has filed a claim of battery. In order for them to meet this burden, the plaintiff must prove that Harper intended to poison the wine that Genesis drank, and that through that they intended to cause harm to Genesis. In order to meet this burden, they must prove that it was more likely than not. In other words, a preponderance of the evidence. However, they will fail to meet that burden because there are simply too many unanswered questions in this case. In order to show you just how much Harper Martini just wanted peace, you will hear from 3 witnesses. First, you will hear from Dr. R. Cannon. He's a medical doctor with expertise in toxicology and pharmacology. He will show you just how many unanswered questions there really are. He will show you that, simply put, it is impossible to know what caused Genesis's death. And he will show you the evidence that the plaintiff will ignore. Blair Osborne, the wedding planner for Petrillo and Soto's wedding, will take the stand, and she will tell you how she always had a wonderful relationship with Harper. She will tell you how Harper only wanted to bury the hatchet. He didn't want any issues with Genesis. And she will also tell you about Genesis' behavior that evening, June 7th, 2019. Miss Osborne saw how intoxicated Genesis seemed to be. How intoxicated Genesis seemed to be right before having to go to the hospital. And finally, you will hear from Harper herself. She will tell you how she just wanted peace. Casey was the most important thing in the world to her, and hurting her in any way was absolutely out of the question. So even though Harper's relationship with Genesis was not ideal, today she will explain how all she wanted to do was ensure that Genesis and Casey had a smooth wedding. By the end of this trial, it will be clear. Harper just wanted peace. That is why we will ask you to find Harper not liable. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Now we will move into the plaintiff's case in chief. At this time, the plaintiff may call their first witness when ready.
Yes, Your Honor. This time, the plaintiff calls Ms. Angel Rodriguez to the stand.
You may proceed.
Good evening. Please introduce yourself to the court.
Hi, my name is Angel Rodriguez.
Ms. Rodriguez, what is it you do for a living?
Well, every day is certainly a surprise, but most days as a kindergarten teacher, I'm making sure the kids don't shove crayons up each other's noses.
What brought you here to Midlands?
I moved here in 2015 after getting an amazing job offer at Rapid River Valley Elementary School that I just couldn't pass up.
So, Ms. Rodriguez, how did you first come to know Casey Soto and Genesis Petrillo?
Well, being new to the area and all, I decided to put myself out there a bit more by attending a trivia night at a local bar where our mutual friend Drew introduced me to Genesis and Casey.
How would you describe your relationship with the two after you first met them?
After that night in a bar, we were like 3 peas in a pod. Genesis and Casey made a wonderful couple, just like Romeo and Juliet. Even though they were dating, I never felt like a third wheel, and we all got along. When they announced their engagement, I was so happy for them.
Were you involved in their wedding preparation at all?
Of course. I was honored to be a part of their wedding day, which would be such a special day for the two lovebirds. Everything leading up to the wedding was going great. That was until Casey's only parent, Harper, got involved. That's when things started to kind of take a turn.
What about Harper's involvement changed the planning process?
Well, before Harper got involved, it seemed as if Genesis and Casey already had a plan for their dream wedding. Once Harper got in the mix, though, she started changing everything, and I mean everything. She even got a wedding planner that Casey and Genesis didn't ask for. But the biggest shock was when the venue for the wedding was changed.
Objection, lack of personal knowledge.
Your Honor, if I may respond.
What part of the testimony is counsel saying there's no knowledge for?
Your Honor, I'm referring to specifically Casey and Soto not requesting the wedding planner that Harper Martini got for their wedding on June 7th, 2019. There hasn't been enough foundation laid that Ms. Rodriguez knew that both Casey and Genesis had any intent or any opinion on the matter.
I don't think I heard any foundation that they did not request a wedding planner. If you lay that foundation, I will allow that testimony.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Rodriguez, who was it that chose the wedding venue?
Well, it was Harper. Originally, Genesis and Casey were set at having their wedding at another local winery, Rosie and Pedro. That's where they met, and it was special for the both of them. They didn't want anyone to control their wedding. They had their own plans, which they told me.
Objection, hearsay.
Response?
Your Honor, the witness is not eliciting any direct statement from the two. She is simply stating what she got from being around both of those two, her personal opinion of what she drew from them.
Your Honor, may be heard.
You may.
The witness just specifically stated at the end of her testimony that both Genesis and Casey told her that they didn't want anybody else to be involved with their wedding planning. This testimony relies on out-of-court statements being offered for the truth of the matter asserted and therefore is hearsay.
Does plaintiff's counsel have an exception that would apply here?
Not only, Your Honor, just the fact that it was not a direct statement being elicited. It was just what the witness had got from her encounters with the two.
Okay. At this time, I'm going to sustain the objection.
Move to strike all testimony regarding Casey, Soto, and Genesis Petrillo's plans of the wedding.
Granted.
Now, Ms. Rodriguez, how would you describe the relationship between the three, particularly Harper and Genesis?
It was pretty tense. They didn't always get along, especially as the wedding got closer. Harper was constantly arguing with Genesis, and her attitude towards Genesis caused a lot of problems between the three. Sometimes I felt like I was still at work dealing with kindergartners, because of all the petty bickering.
Ms. Rodriguez, do you remember what happened the next time you were with the three?
Yeah, it was when all the members of their wedding party got together at the Black Bear Hotel and Casino. After lots of drinking, Harper's name came up in the conversation. Next thing I knew, the two lovebirds had separated from each other, looking pretty upset, kind of like my students do when recess time is over. But when I tried asking Genesis what was going on, he said he had to make a phone call and just left.
Moving on, Ms. Rodriguez, could you tell us about the wedding rehearsal dinner?
Yes, how could I forget? As usual, Genesis and Harper could not stop fighting. At one point, Harper went as far as saying that Genesis should just leave and save this family the headache. Otherwise, I will make her disappear. After this harsh comment, I tried talking to Genesis, but he seemed very shaken up. He seemed afraid that Harper would harm him in some way.
Objection, improper character evidence may be heard on those grounds.
You may. I think I'm going to need you to explain what in that was character evidence.
Yes, Your Honor. During her testimony, Ms. Rodriguez stated that Harper and Genesis were fighting as usual, which is an improper characterization of Harper as someone who constantly causes aggravations or is fighting, and therefore the plaintiff counsel is trying to show that because Harper was doing this in the past, therefore he'd be more likely to cause fights or arguments in the future.
Does plaintiff have a response?
Yes, Your Honor. The witness is not saying that Harper caused these arguments. She simply stated that they were arguing. And her experience with the two in the past, being with them from the time they met on to now, she would know that it was usual for them to argue. However, she never stated that Harper was the one that caused these arguments.
Okay, I will allow her to testify that they were arguing on the night in question, but I would ask that you limit it to that instance rather than a sweeping statement that they have argued in the past.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Ms. Rodriguez, when did you next see Harper?
The next time I saw Harper, it looked like she was headed towards the kitchen with the canister that had the word pesticide on it in her hand. Out of curiosity, I asked Harper what it was for, and she responded that it was for Genesis, because Genesis is such a pest. She said she was just kidding, but I just thought that as I tell my students, you should never say something that you don't mean.
What happened after that?
Next came the speeches. Genesis gave a very positive and uplifting speech. I was pretty proud of him. But then was Harper's toast. I was really surprised by how Harper seemed to be mocking Genesis in her toast.
Did Harper speak about Genesis anymore that night?
Yes, actually. Later on that night, Harper gave another toast towards Genesis. She even gifted him a bottle of wine. Everyone got a bottle, but Genesis was different. His said car on it, while ours said horizon.
Did anyone else but Genesis try the wine from his bottle?
No, I was the only other person to try it, but I immediately spit it out because it tasted weird to me. It kind of reminded me of the juice we give to the kids after recess, but Genesis continued to drink it.
What happened next?
Well, Casey went to bed and the rest of us stayed up, and Genesis continued to drink from the car bottle. At around 11 p.m., Genesis was out of it, something I'd never seen before. He had slurred speech, out of whack coordination, eventually started vomiting, sweating, had flushed skin. He couldn't even drink water without throwing it back up. The last thing Genesis said before passing out was 911.
Objection, hearsay.
I'm going to overrule it. It was a question or a command. There's no truth in that statement.
Miss Rodriguez, how did you respond to this?
I did what he asked. I called 911. At first, I decided not to tell Casey in order to spare her the worry the night before her big day. But once I was told that Genesis was in a coma that was likely related to poison, I went back to Peony Estates to break the news to Casey.
Objection, hearsay.
Does plaintiff wish to respond?
Yes, Your Honor, I would ask what direct statements being elicited as hearsay in this statement by the witness.
I believe the statement that she was in a coma related to poisoning is the statement we're discussing now.
Your Honor, to my knowledge, this is not a direct statement. This is simply her knowledge. If she went to the hospital with Genesis and found that he was in a coma, this would have been common knowledge since she was at the hospital at the time of this diagnosis.
Did you lay that foundation? Did I miss that?
Your Honor, no foundation has been laid so far that Genesis, that Ms. Rodriguez heard or saw anything else at the hospital besides the fact that she was there. Her testimony that this was in a coma as a result of poison was a result of statements that she heard that informed her testimony today. Therefore, it's hearsay.
Yeah, I tend to agree that it's hearsay. If you can establish that she was at the hospital and observed these things, then I'll allow it.
Yes, Your Honor.
Move to strike testimony so far regarding the coma and the poisoning.
Motion granted.
Ms. Rodriguez, after you were asked to call 911, what did you do?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? I couldn't hear you.
After being asked to call 911, what did you proceed to do?
I called 911 and I decided not to tell Casey so that she wouldn't worry the day before her wedding. But once we got to the hospital, Genesis entered in a coma, and I heard some doctors saying that it might be related to poison. So I went back to Peony Estates to break the news to Casey.
Your Honor, at this time, I renew my objection to hearsay.
Yeah, I'm gonna sustain the objection. It's unless counsel can cite an exception as to why this wouldn't be hearsay.
Yes, Your Honor. I'll move on.
Okay.
Move to strike the testimony again, Your Honor.
Motion granted. And just to spare time, we will assume any sustained objections are stricken after this.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Ms. Rodriguez, what happened once you made it back to Peony Estates?
I ran into Harper, and to my surprise, she said, Genesis got poisoned? Oh no, we'll have to cancel the wedding. Go tell Casey. Casey needs to know. I thought it was pretty weird that before I even mentioned Genesis being in a coma, Harper already knew. After that, I just went to Casey's room.
After you told Casey about Genesis' condition, what did you do?
We went back to the hospital, but unfortunately, we were too late. Genesis was already gone, and it breaks my heart that Casey didn't get to say goodbye to Genesis. And I just can't believe he's really gone. One of the pieces from our pod is missing, and now will never be complete.
Your Honor, I have no further questions at this time.
The defense may cross-examine when ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Rodriguez, I just have a few more questions to ask you. Now, you claim that during the wedding planning, everything was going smoothly until Harper got involved. Isn't that correct?
Yes, that's correct. That's what I stated.
And you also said that Harper was the main source of tension during the wedding planning. Isn't that true?
Yes, I believe so. Once she got involved, things kind of took a turn.
However, Ms. Rodriguez, at that time, you really didn't know Harper, did you?
Not as much as I knew Genesis and Casey, no.
That's right. You had really only met Harper once or twice.
Yes, this is true.
In fact, you were told by your friend Drew Mustakis not to ask about Harper's involvement in the wedding planning. Isn't that right?
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty weird comment.
So you never really got the full story of how Harper was involved. Isn't that right?
No, only what I could observe and what was told to me.
In fact, the arguments became so complicated that it was hard to tell who was mad at who.
Yeah, I guess you could put it that way as well.
Or what they were arguing about.
Well, most of the time they were just disagreeing.
And you couldn't even tell really who started the argument in the first place.
No.
But, Ms. Rodriguez, from what you could see, for the most part, Genesis, Harper, and Casey were trying to keep it civil. Isn't that right?
Towards the end, yes, I could agree to that to some extent.
So that's a yes to my question. They were trying to keep the argument civil.
Yes.
Now, I want to move on to that wedding party on May 12th, 2019. You were at that party at the Black Bear Casino, correct?
Yes, I was.
And Genesis was drinking a lot.
Yeah, she was.
In fact, you found him throwing up in the bathroom. Isn't that true?
Yeah, poor thing. He was throwing up a lot.
And you also heard Casey arguing with Genesis about Harper. Isn't that true?
Yeah, they were arguing.
But you didn't hear any specifics of the conversation.
No, it was hard to hear because I was more focused on Genesis.
But what you do know is that Genesis said that he had to make a phone call.
Yeah, and then he just left.
And then when you spoke to him that next morning, Genesis stated that he had to apologize to Harper. Isn't that true?
Yeah, but he didn't really say why.
So that's a yes to my question.
Yes, I said yes.
Now, I want to move on to the day of the actual rehearsal dinner. There were 2 toasts you said that Harper Martini made. Isn't that true?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I want to talk about that first toast. Now, during this toast, Harper called Genesis a problem child. Isn't that true?
Yes. It was a bit harsh.
And although it was harsh, as far as you could tell, Harper was joking.
I can't really say if Harper was joking or not. I don't know what she was thinking.
But as far as you could tell, Harper was joking. Isn't that true?
I guess so, yes.
And during that toast, Genesis was shaking under the table. Isn't that true?
Yeah, uncontrollably almost.
But Miss Rodriguez, you couldn't tell if she was shaking out of fear.
Yeah, I didn't know if he was scared or angry. I couldn't really tell.
That's right. You couldn't tell if Genesis was shaking out of anger.
Yes.
Well, Miss Rodriguez, Genesis was getting married the next day. Isn't that true?
Yeah, but unfortunately it didn't happen.
So Genesis could have just been nervous about this life-changing event. Isn't that true?
Objection, Your Honor, to speculation. If I may be heard.
No, I see where you're going with this. I tend to agree that you were asking the witness to delve into the mindset. Sustained.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, I want to move on to that second toast, Ms. Rodriguez. And at that toast, Harper Martini gave each person at the dinner a bottle of wine. Isn't that true?
Yes, but they were different from the one that Genesis got.
That's right. Genesis got a specific fancy bottle of wine. Isn't that true?
Yes, this is true.
And Genesis drank that wine by himself?
Yeah, I tried a little bit of it, but I spit it out.
In fact, Genesis had several glasses of wine over a 45-minute period. Isn't that true?
I wasn't really keeping track of time, but yes, I guess that's true.
And then, after drinking several glasses of wine during a short time period, they seemed out of it.
Yeah.
And Genesis was slurring his speech.
Among other things, yes.
And Ms. Rodriguez, as you told us, you took a glass of wine as well.
Like I said, but I spit it out.
And you didn't feel out of it.
No, I did not.
And you weren't slurring your speech.
No, I was not.
That's because, in fact, you took one sip of wine. Isn't that true?
Yes, that is true.
Now, you've been good friends with Genesis since 2016. Isn't that true?
Yes.
And since Genesis's death, you've spent all of your time trying to bring Peony Estates to justice, right?
I just want what's right for my friend.
You've reached out to police.
Yes, I have.
You've reached out to journalists.
This is true as well.
You've reached out to attorneys.
Yes.
Ms. Rodriguez, you've never actually witnessed any pesticide contamination go on at Peony Estates, have you?
Objection, Your Honor, to speculation, if I may be heard.
Sure.
I'm sorry, actually, Your Honor, if I may make an objection instead of speculation to lack of personal knowledge. Counsel is asking the witness about something that she would have no knowledge of as to whether there's ever been pesticide contamination at Peony Estates.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yeah, you may.
I'm not asking witness to conclude whether or not pesticide contamination ever went on in general at Peony Estates. I'm simply asking her to give a rationally based perception of whether or not she's personally ever seen pesticide contamination go on at Peony.
Yeah, I agree that he is asking if she's ever perceived it. He's not asking something outside of her knowledge base. So I'm going to overrule the objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Rodriguez, I'll re-ask the question. You've never actually seen any pesticide contamination happen at Peony Estates, correct?
No, I have not.
And you never actually saw Harper Martini put pesticide in any bottles of wine, isn't that true?
No, I never actually saw her.
Yet you are here today testifying against Peony Estates and Harper Martini, correct?
Yes, because like I said, I just want what's right for my friend.
Thank you. No further questions.
Does the plaintiff wish to conduct a brief redirect?
No, Your Honor. I just ask that the witness be allowed to be excused.
Okay. Ms. Rodriguez, you are excused and may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
The plaintiff may call their next witness when ready.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the plaintiff calls Dr. Jimin Kwan to the stand.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Dr. Kwan. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Dr. Jimin Kwan.
What do you do for a living?
Well, chiefly I'm the father of 7 wonderful kids, as well as being the chief emergency physician at River Valley Hospital in Midlands, where I lead a team of doctors and nurses in the ER.
How long have you worked there?
I've worked there for almost 20 years now, and that's partly the reason why I'm one of the leading experts on toxicology in Midlands.
Well, what kind of education do you need to be an ER doctor?
I received my bachelor's in biology with a minor in chemistry, received my MD at UNC Chapel Hill, completed my residency at Emory's Department of Emergency Medicine, and completed my fellowship in toxicology under Dr. J.T. Seaver.
Have you ever been published?
Oh, yes, of course. Many articles, mainly on toxicology and the effects it has on the human system, as well as emergency medicine.
Do you have any other qualifications?
Indeed, I do. I serve on the board of directors of Doctors for Organic Solutions, an organization that advocates against the use of chemical pesticides as they're a scourge for the environment as well as for people.
Dr. Kwan, how are you involved in today's case specifically?
Yes, I was the ER doctor who admitted and treated Genesis Petrillo on June 7th and 8th, up to their tragic demise.
What materials were you given to come to your conclusions in today's case?
I was given all relevant exhibits along with Petrillo's toxicology report.
Were those materials sufficient for your findings?
Yes.
Dr. Kwan, what method did you use for today's case?
Well, I used the gold standard of diagnosis, beginning first with an interview, followed by a physical examination, and concluding with laboratory testing.
Now, I'd like to begin with that interview you talked about. How did that go?
Well, Petrillo arrived at the hospital by ambulance with their friend Angel Rodriguez, which, in the following conversation with Miss Rodriguez and what I could gather from Petrillo, they had been drinking that night, after which I admitted Petrillo to the hospital that night for alcohol poisoning.
Well, what symptoms was he exhibiting?
Petrillo was exhibiting slurred speech, stomach cramps, tightness in their chest, along with nausea and vomiting. However, this wasn't really cause for concern.
Well, why weren't you concerned about him?
Well, while his symptoms might seem severe, I wasn't concerned Petrillo was in any real danger. I brought along this alcohol impairment chart to better explain this.
Would you recognize that chart if I showed it to you in court today, Dr. Kwan?
Yes, I would.
Can we get Exhibit 23 on the screen, please? Dr. Kwan, what are we looking at here?
Well, right now we're looking at an alcohol impairment chart that outlines the effects of alcohol on the human body.
Would you say this is a fair and accurate depiction of alcohol impairment?
Yes.
Have any changes or alterations been made to this document since last time you saw it?
No.
At this time, plaintiff offers Exhibit 23 into evidence.
Any objections from the defense?
No, Your Honor.
So admitted.
Now, Dr. Kwan, where on this chart would you say that Genesis fell on the night of June 7th, 2019?
I would say Petrillo fell on the high-risk area, that mid-orange color, which doesn't mean high risk of death, as I wasn't worried until I conducted the physical examination.
Well, let's talk about that physical examination for a minute. What did you learn?
Sure. I learned quite a lot from the physical examination. At this point, I admitted Petrillo to the hospital, checked their vitals. He couldn't walk, continuous and profuse vomiting, along with other symptoms, which led me to believe that this wasn't an open and shut case of alcohol poisoning.
Well, what led you to believe that?
Well, three things. Firstly, Petrillo's pupils were severely contracted, which is the opposite of which in alcohol poisoning, where they're instead dilated. The second is involuntary muscle twitches, as these are inconsistent with alcohol poisoning. And the third was a very slow pulse. In alcohol poisoning cases, you generally see a rapid pulse.
Dr. Kwan, what are these symptoms indicative of?
Well, these symptoms are indicative of organophosphate poisoning.
Well, for those of us who aren't scientists, what's an organophosphate?
Sure. It's a pesticide, a chemical compound designed to kill insects, which, as you can imagine, doesn't work wonders for the human body.
Could you tell the members of the jury what the risks associated with pesticide poisoning are?
Yes, as well as the other symptoms that were shown previously, the main problem is they inhibit the production of acetylcholinesterase, which is a fancy way of saying this leads to nervous system failure.
Well, what were your next steps?
I immediately ordered a lab test to confirm my suspicions.
Were you able to get that test back?
Not before Petrillo's death. However, the symptoms were so consistent with this type of poisoning that I felt justified to administer the antidote. However, I was too late.
Did you ever get those test results back?
Yes, we did. And the results confirmed low levels of cholinesterase in the plasma and a presence of organophosphates in his stomach.
Is there any other explanation for low levels of acetylcholinesterase?
Technically, yes, but it's so rare that when a doctor admits a patient, the most likely cause is organophosphate pesticide poisoning.
Well, how does one get exposed to organophosphates?
Well, there are three types of ways. There's inhalation, skin contact, and ingestion.
Did you ever figure out how Genesis was exposed to the poison?
Yes, we subsequently tested the wine in Petrillo's stomach and found it contained organophosphates, showing that it was indeed the source of the pesticides.
Well, what did this lead you to believe?
I concluded that Petrillo ingested the wine contained the organophosphates corroborated by the report, which ultimately and tragically caused his death. The timeframe suggests that it was the pesticide within the wine, as it's logistically unlikely that it came from another source.
Thank you, Dr. Kwan. I have no further questions at this time.
The defense may cross-examine the witness when ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Hello, Dr. Kwan. So you're on the board of directors for Doctors for Organic Solutions, correct?
Yes, I am.
And you're an advocate against the use of chemical pesticides?
Objection, Your Honor, to relevance. Dr. Kwan's involvement in a group that advocates for the use of chemicals has no bearing on any fact in today's case.
Your Honor, I'm presenting potential bias on the behalf of the witness.
I guess, can you explain how that bias would affect his testimony?
Sure. First of all, relevance is a very low bar. And second of all, reputation is relevant. And so in this case, I would like to, clarify Dr. Kwan's reputation and his involvement as being an advocate against the use of chemical pesticides.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Briefly.
I don't believe any of the questions opposing counsel actually referred to Dr. Kwan's, what was the word? Oh, I'm so sorry. His reputation at all. And I believe that all of these questions are going to his involvement in some kind of group that advocates for chemicals that I really don't believe any of this is relevant, Your Honor.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yeah, briefly.
Sure. He's testifying against pesticides in this case. And therefore, this case deals with pesticides, therefore it's relevant.
I will allow you to make a brief offer of proof outside the presence of the jury before I rule on this. If you're able to establish that this actually creates some sort of bias, I'll allow it, but otherwise we'll sustain the objection. So you can ask 2 or 3 questions, I guess, but.
I can continue with questioning.
Yeah, we're gonna outside the presence of the jury, we're gonna allow
Okay.
2 or 3 questions. And if you're able to establish the bias, then we'll allow it.
All right. Thank you, Your Honor. So continuing on, Petrillo appeared to be heavily intoxicated when you first encountered him, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and you did initially believe this to be a case of alcohol poisoning.
Initially, yes.
And did you further evaluate his BAC?
I'm sorry, can you restate the question?
Did you further evaluate his BAC?
What do you mean by further evaluate his BAC?
Did you consider the possibility that his BAC could have been higher based on previous alcohol consumption, or his BAC could have been higher at an earlier point in the evening?
Well, I considered it, but given the effects of, I believe you're talking about my conclusion here in the process of organophosphates, is that the presence of organophosphates in his systems, I believe, was the most important cause. So it wasn't really that big of a consideration over his BAC at the time.
But so you did not further evaluate his BAC? Yes or no? Okay. And after his death, did you consider other causes of death other than the presence of pesticides?
No, because there wasn't evidence to show.
So for instance, could you confirm that his death was not caused by an allergic reaction?
So what's interesting about the medical profession is while I can't confirm, my job is to look where the evidence leads me, and the evidence shows that this was a case of that, wherein my conclusion was that it was due to organophosphates. However, it could be, but just like the lottery, you could win a lot of money, but you also might just waste money.
So you cannot confirm that his death was not caused by an allergic reaction?
No, that's what I said. No.
Just clarifying, thank you. And one other thing, did you examine his liver function either before or in observation or after his death?
No.
Okay. And I just want to talk a bit about acetylcholinesterase.
Mhm.
There are other explanations for high levels of acetylcholinesterase, correct?
For high levels of acetylcholinesterase?
Sorry, low levels of acetylcholinesterase,
Yes.
other than pesticide poisoning?
Yes, but as I said previously, whenever in medical literature and doctors as a whole, when we get cases where this happens, the most likely cause is organophosphate pesticide poisoning.
One last thing, you cannot confirm that the pesticide was ingested through the wine, correct?
No, I can't, but given that the organophosphates were only found in the wine under the subsequent tests, it's highly likely.
just to clarify your answer there, you cannot confirm that, correct?
No.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
I have no redirect, Your Honor, at this time. I just ask that this witness may be allowed to be dismissed.
All right, Dr. Kwan, you are excused and may step down. The plaintiff may call their next witness when ready.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. At this time, the plaintiff would like to call Ms. Casey Soto to the stand.
You may proceed when ready.
Thank you. Please introduce yourself to the court.
Hi, my name is Casey Soto.
And why are you here today, Ms. Soto?
Well, I'm here because I was subpoenaed to testify in the lawsuit against my mother and her winery, Peony Estates.
And can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure thing. I grew up in Midlands with my mother, Harper Martini. When I was little, my mom was the only one who was always in the front row at my school plays. I wasn't even a lead, and she still showed up every single night. During my childhood, though, she could be very controlling.
In what way was she controlling?
Although she was well-intentioned, she sometimes took things a bit too far. I mean, when I first showed up in my college dorm, she was there every weekend to ask me questions about where I was going and who I was hanging out with.
Was there a reason for this?
She didn't want to miss out on anything, which was great when I was younger and only had her to rely on. Later on, I came to rely on Genesis for that support too.
When did you first meet Genesis?
I first met Genesis in 2012 at a party our friend Drew Matsukas was having for one of his college buddies. I'm a pretty shy person, and Genesis was the life of the party type, so I was instantly attracted to him.
And what happened after your first meeting?
Both of us pretty much talked only to each other the entire party, which surprised me because I thought he would lose interest in me. The more I found out about him, the more I liked him. We were basically attached from the hip from then on.
When did the defendant first meet Genesis?
I knew that it would be a shock for her, so I waited to take him home to meet my mom. I was worried about the meeting because they were the two most important people in my life, and I wanted everything to be perfect.
And was everything perfect?
No, far from it. I wanted nothing more than for my mom to get along with Genesis.
How did the defendant feel about your relationships?
My mom had issues with Genesis from the very beginning. We both tried to smooth things over with her, but that didn't matter.
What do you mean it didn't matter?
My mom was always complaining about Genesis and how he wasn't respectful. She was worried that he was going to break up our family, even though that wasn't at all what I wanted.
How was your relationship with Genesis after this meeting?
It went really well, as long as they weren't around each other. When Genesis surprised me with his proposal, I was thrilled. It was actually kind of funny because I was planning on proposing anyway. I had read this article that said women needed to be more assertive and just go for it.
How did the defendant react to this proposal?
She freaked out. I thought we could plan the wedding ourselves so we wouldn't stress her out, but that's the opposite of what happened.
So what did happen?
Harper happened. Genesis and I were planning on having the wedding at another local winery, Rosie and Pedro, where we had first met. But instead, my mom took control of everything.
What do you mean she took control of everything?
She planned the entire wedding to be at Peony Estates.
And how did Genesis react to the defendant's offer?
He was uneasy and nervous about it, but he did think that my mom offering to pay for the wedding was a nice gesture. What really pushed their already rocky relationship over the edge was our pre-wedding party.
What happened there?
We had a final party for our friends in May at Black Bear Casino. I never had much luck gambling, but everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves, and at the time, I thought the night was a success.
What made you change your mind?
A couple days later, my mom played me a voicemail that Genesis had left her the night of the party. We had quite a few drinks that night, and Genesis was drunk when he left the message. And while it was honest to me, it was a bit harsh.
How was it harsh?
Genesis let my mom know that we were planning on going to France after the wedding, but he said it when he was drunk, so it didn't come across very well.
And how did the defendant react to this voicemail?
Horribly. She told Genesis to reconsider his plans. She said I had to stay in Midlands with her, and she didn't care if Genesis stayed or ended 6 feet under.
And what happened next?
I tried to talk to her about it, but she was really stressed out, which is what I was worried about from the beginning.
I'd like to talk about the rehearsal dinner. Can you tell us about what happened on that day?
Well, I was really nervous. At the rehearsal, my mom was snapping at Genesis for being a few minutes late. And that's when I just considered giving up and canceling the whole wedding.
What was Genesis's reaction to your hesitation?
Genesis completely understood, but wanted nothing more than to be with me for the rest of his life. He was worried that my mom might try something to hurt or embarrass him, though.
And how did the defendant take it?
She surprised me. I thought she would be upset because of all the wedding planning, but she acted like all her problems had just gone away.
Could you tell us about what happened at the dinner?
The dinner was great. There were speeches and toasts for us. My nerves were actually starting to dissipate. But later that evening, my mom surprised both Genesis and I.
How did she surprise you?
It seemed she was trying to extend an olive branch. She presented Genesis with a bottle of her new Cara wine. She made a really big deal about it too, saying, "This is for you," when she handed it to him.
Did Genesis drink any of the wine that night?
I saw him pour a couple of glasses, and I know for sure one of them was for him. I didn't stick around because I was getting kind of tired, and I knew Genesis would stay up for a while, so I kissed him goodnight and went back to my room.
I'd like to talk about what happened the next day. What happened then?
I was getting dressed early, around 7 or 8, and my mom came in and told me that Genesis couldn't be found anywhere. She said this was a sign that Genesis had bailed. I refused to believe it and just kept getting ready.
Could you tell the jury when you found out about Genesis?
It wasn't until Angel rushed in that I heard that Genesis was in the hospital. My first thought was this had to be some kind of horrible joke, but when I saw the look on Angel's face, my heart just sank.
What did you do next?
I rushed to the hospital with Angel. We were 5 minutes too late. I couldn't fathom how something like it could happen. We were ready to spend the rest of our lives together. I kept thinking, why? The doctor was telling me about pesticide poisoning, and I immediately thought of Peony Estates.
What made you think of Peony Estates?
My mom mentioned using pesticides before the wedding. I don't want to think that she would have poisoned him, but I can't trust her either.
And why can't you trust the defendant?
I had the exact same food as Genesis at the dinner. The only thing I didn't have was the wine that my mother gave him.
No further questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Cross-exam.
Ms. Soto, I know this could be a hard time for you, so let me know if you need a moment. I just need to ask you a few more questions regarding the case at hand. Now, your mother, Harper Martini, raised you alone, right?
She did, yes.
And Harper worked hard, but made time for you. Is that correct?
Yes, she was my rock when I was little.
And she was always well-intentioned?
Yes, she was.
In fact, Harper told you that she had always dreamed of having your wedding at Peony. Is that correct?
Yeah, she wanted it to be at Peony Estates.
And she also mentioned that she believed your wedding at the estates would boost publicity. Correct?
She did mention something about a health inspection, that she thought having the wedding at Peony Estates would be good to benefit her.
Now I'd like to move on to the planning of the wedding. Now Harper offered to host the wedding at Peony, and she offered to pay for a significant portion of the wedding. Is that correct?
She did, yes. Both Genesis and I thought that was a nice offer.
But you were interested in the financial issues, correct?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
You were interested in the financial aspects.
No.
You didn't believe the estates to have the funds to support the wedding, correct?
Oh, that's true. Yes, I didn't.
And you were concerned due to an unforeseen leak in the shed. Is that right?
Well, she had mentioned something about pesticide poisoning, and I asked her if it would be okay, or if it would be dangerous at all. So.
But you never knew if they actually moved the items from the shed into the bottling area.
No.
All right. Now, you would say that Harper and Genesis were pretty much at odds since they first met, right?
Yeah, they didn't like each other at all.
In fact, on their first meeting, Martini treated Genesis to a wine tasting at Peony Estates, right?
When I took Genesis home for dinner, Genesis did make a little slip up with the wine. I didn't tell him that my mom was the owner of Peony Estates, and there was this whole mix up with the wine, and it was a slip up. It was my own fault, though.
And Genesis responded by asking for Rosie and Pedro wine instead, correct?
Yes.
And it was at the later meeting with the wedding planner, Blair Osborne, that you learned of their dispute.
Which dispute are you referring to?
The dispute between Genesis and Martini. Beforehand, you had only observed friendly banter, combat. But it was at the meeting with Blair Osborne you learned that there was a dispute at hand.
Well, they were constantly fighting, so yeah, there was always a dispute going on.
But it was through a voicemail that this became apparent, right?
Yes, the voicemail that was left at the night of the party, yeah.
And at the pre-wedding party, you would describe Genesis as very drunk, correct?
Yeah, he was pretty drunk.
And Genesis said some horrible things, is that right?
He did. He was drunk. We all say terrible things when we're drunk.
And was cruel to Harper?
Yeah, he was cruel. I wish he hadn't said that. But I mean, Harper did need to know that we were going to France, so.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the pesticides you were concerned about. You were somewhat concerned about the pesticide storage, is that right?
I was, yes.
But Harper told you the fixes were simple formalities, like installing employee hand washing signs.
She did, yeah.
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance. We're discussing battery, not negligence.
I apologize. Can you repeat the question? There was a loud noise outside the courtroom right as that was happening.
Harper told you the fixes were formalities, like installing employee hand washing signs in regards to the pesticide storage.
I do tend to agree with opposing counsel. How does that make any of the elements of battery more or less likely in this case?
It's simply bringing up the concerns that Soto had in regards to the relationship between Genesis and Martini.
Does opposing counsel wish to respond?
Your Honor, I don't see how this has any bearing on the points that he's claiming it has bearing on, simply.
Yeah, I tend to agree that if this was a negligence per se trial, I think it would be relevant. But in this case, I'm going to sustain the objection.
Now, Genesis expressed the fact that they were concerned Harper might try to hurt or embarrass them, as you mentioned, right?
Yes.
But you didn't think that Harper would go as far as that.
No, I mean, no one wants to ever believe their mother would do something like that.
Now, I'd like to talk about the rehearsal dinner. Around 10 p.m., Harper made a toast to Genesis.
Yes.
Right? And gave him a special bottle of the Caro wine.
Yes, that's true.
But Harper sounded sincere in the toast. Is that correct?
He did. And I hoped that this was finally evident of her trying to make amends.
And as you mentioned, Genesis poured a few glasses of the wine.
Yes, he did.
But you're not certain if someone else drank the other glasses, are you?
No, I'm not. I went to bed.
And when you heard of pesticide as being a potential cause of death, you didn't think peony, did you?
No, I did.
You did. But you concluded that it didn't make sense for the poisoning to come from peony.
No,
After all, this was not only your mother's vineyard, but your own family vineyard that you had entrusted to you after you would take on the vineyard.
I'm sorry, is there a question?
Did you or did you not believe the pesticides to be related to Peony Estates?
I immediately thought of Peony Estates as soon as the doctor said something about pesticide poisoning.
All right, no further questions.
Okay. I believe plaintiff is out of time for their case in chief, so there will not be a redirect. Are both parties okay with taking a brief 3-minute recess before beginning the defense case in chief?
Yes, Your Honor, that's fine with us.
Okay. At 3:31, we will reconvene and the defense will call their first witness.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, are the parties ready to proceed with the defense case?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. And before we begin with that, is anyone aware of what the all loss time is? I just want to be mindful of that.
We have been trying to figure it out.
Okay. Okay. Well, if anybody in the call figures that out,
Same on our end. We'll try to get it to you as soon as possible.
okay. I just want to make sure you all have enough time for your closings and everything. But we will go ahead and start the case in chief for the defense then.
I think we got started around 1:30. Sorry, we're in a different time zone. But I think all loss is around 5-ish. But
Okay.
I'll try and find that out for sure.
Okay. I think we're making good time, but all right. The defense may call their first witness at this time.
At this time, the defense begins its case in chief and calls Dr. R. Cannon to the stand.
You may proceed.
Hello, Dr. Cannon. Could you please introduce yourself to the court? Dr. Cannon, I'm unable to hear you.
My name is Rajesh Cannon.
And what do you do, Dr. Cannon?
I'm a medical doctor with specific expertise in toxicology and pharmacology.
All right, and where did you go to school?
I first went to undergrad at Ohio State, where I majored in chemistry, before parking my car in Harvard Yard, going to Harvard Medical School with an emphasis on toxicology in 1996. I've served as the chief toxicologist at the Massachusetts General Hospital, faculty at the Midlands Medical School, and now I work as a consultant for Gardner Consulting.
All right, so Dr. Cannon, how are you involved in today's case?
I was hired by Mrs. Martini's attorneys on April 2nd, 2020, to assess the conclusions of a Dr. Jimaine Kwan, as well as to investigate the relationship between Mr. Petrillo's death and Mrs. Martini's winery.
So for this investigation, what materials did you look at?
I relied on several exhibits that were given to me, including 2 different toxicology and lab testing reports, as well as Dr. Kwan's report and the affidavit of Angel Rodriguez, among other exhibits that were given to me.
And were these materials sufficient?
Yes, they were.
Okay. Moving into the case itself, what method did you use in this case?
I used the CAD method, which stands for Comparison, Analysis, and Diagnosis.
And has this method been peer reviewed?
Yes, absolutely. This is a method that I developed several decades ago in conjunction with Harvard Medical School, and this is the best, most peer-reviewed method for clinical diagnosis, and it's what I rely on all of my engagements.
Okay, and do you believe that you applied this method reliably to this case?
Yes.
All right, so regarding the case, what were your conclusions?
I was able to conclude that there was no definitive cause of death of Genesis Petrillo's death, but rather there were a number of different possibilities that could have contributed to his eventual death.
All right, let's take a step back. What was the first step of your method?
The first step was comparison, where I look at a top-level overview of different causes and I compare them to each other.
So what causes did you compare in this case?
In this stage, I was looking at alcohol poisoning, allergic reactions, and liver disease as 3 primary causes.
So after you looked at these causes, what did you do next?
The next step is the analysis step, where I support my initial comparison with the actual data that is presented to me, and I further along my conclusion.
All right, let's start with alcohol poisoning. What did you look at in terms of alcohol poisoning?
There were 2 things that I used in conjunction to discover this. First is Genesis Petrillo's blood alcohol content. It was 0.16% when she arrived at the hospital. While this is not high enough to cause death, combined with the fact that I had read Angel Rodriguez's affidavit, and I saw that Mr. Petrillo was actually vomiting at the engagement party, I can say that there was a decent enough evidence to indicate that the blood alcohol level of Genesis Petrillo could have been much higher than 0.16.
Objection, Your Honor, misleading to the jury may be heard.
Matt?
Your Honor, Dr. Kwan has testified to the fact that he
I'm sorry, you muted.
sorry, I believe I'm having issues with my internet.
No worries.
I'll re-raise the objection later. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
Your Honor, may I continue?
Yes, I believe counsel will re-object if they feel you have violated or elicited some misleading testimony. You can proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Why do you think it could have been higher?
Well, we know that Mr. Pachillo quit drinking at approximately 12:42 a.m. on June 8th, 2019, meaning that his BAC would have had to have peaked earlier. However, we can't exactly say what his peak BAC was that night.
Okay, let's move to the second possibility. What was that?
The second possibility that I looked at was the possibility of an allergic reaction.
All right, and what supports this theory?
The biggest thing was the presence of a buffet. Buffets are known to have several known allergens that can exacerbate allergic reactions in different people. The second thing was that Mr. Pachillo did not get regular health checkups, so it's very possible that he developed an allergy without even knowing.
Okay. And what was the third possibility that you looked at?
The third possibility I looked at was potential liver disease.
All right. And can you explain why that is a possibility?
Sure. This is a possibility because I saw that there was low acetylcholinesterase levels. This usually indicates to me that there's problems with the liver and breaking down certain toxins and especially alcohol.
All right. And is there anything else that supports this theory?
The one other thing was the fact that Mr. Pachillo did not have regular checkups. In fact, Mr. Pachillo had not had any blood tests 3 years prior to his death. Given this, it's very possible that he had developed a chronic liver disease without.
Objection, Your Honor, to lack of personal knowledge. Dr. Kwan just testified that Genesis had not had any blood tests in the 3 years leading up to this point. I just asked that they lay the foundation as to how Dr. Kwan would know that.
Your Honor, may I be heard?
You may.
Your Honor, Dr. Kwan testified that Pachillo did not have regular health checkups. Therefore, in his review of the materials in the case, Dr. Cannon was able to see this.
So you're stating that Dr. Cannon's knowledge of this is based off Kwan's report?
Yes, it's based on the affidavit.
Which Cannon has told us that he read, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, then I would believe there is personal knowledge for this testimony then. I will overrule the objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor. So Dr. Cannon, let's just move into the final step of your method, diagnosis. What was your diagnosis?
I was able to diagnose that it was definitely respiratory arrest that ultimately caused Genesis Pachillo's death. However, what caused that respiratory arrest could be due to numerous possibilities. There were just too many unanswered questions to list one possibility above the other.
Okay, no further questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Cross, Your Honor.
Sorry, you may proceed.
Dr. Cannon, you work for Gardner Consulting Firm, is that right?
That's correct.
You charge a $50,000 flat fee for your consulting services, don't you?
Yes.
Now, you've only ever testified for the defense, is that right?
That's correct.
And what you do is you take the state's expert report and you provide a second opinion, right?
In this case,
Objection,
yes.
Your Honor, relevance.
Your Honor, I'm simply laying the foundation for this witness to testify, asking him questions about what he does, asking him questions about bias, that kind of thing. This is allowed on cross.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think she's just probing into the methods that he used to allow the question. Overruled.
Now, Dr. Cannon, you charge $50,000 for that opinion every time, don't you?
Correct.
And you have a client that's known as Detsky, Roach, and Rodent Killer, is that right?
That is correct. That's one of my clients.
Now, they instructed you not to find a pesticide responsible, didn't they?
I believe I did get some communications about that, yes.
Someone's mowing outside of my window, I apologize. Now, you don't want to lose Detsky as a client, do you?
What do you mean?
Well, it would cost your firm a lot of money to lose Detsky as a client, right?
I don't know. I'm not in finance. I can't tell you. I'm a doctor.
Has it always been your testimony that to lose Detsky as a client would not cost your firm any money?
Counselor, I'm sure it would lose my firm money. However, I'm not focused on the finances, and I really can't tell you how much it would lose or cost the firm.
Okay, Dr. Cannon, now you would agree with me that you were hired by Harper Martini to assess the work of Dr. Jimin Kwan, is that right?
That's right.
And Dr. Kwan is the attending physician who treated Genesis Petrillo the night and morning of June 8th, right?
That's right.
And Dr. Kwan found pesticides responsible for her death.
She did.
But you take issue with this conclusion because you think there are other possible explanations, right?
Right. There are other possibilities that could explain it equally or almost equally as pesticide use in this case.
Well, let's break those down one by one. Now, I'd like to start with alcohol poisoning. You are aware that Genesis was initially admitted to the hospital for alcohol poisoning.
I was.
But Dr. Kwan ruled that out pretty quickly, didn't he?
He did.
Because you'd agree with me that Genesis's symptoms were actually not consistent with alcohol poisoning, were they?
Not at the time that she was at the hospital, but they could have been earlier.
No, they were actually more in line with pesticide poisoning, right?
Right. In certain instances, there was a possibility of pesticide poisoning. Absolutely.
No, you'd agree with me in saying that the lowest BAC that you've ever seen cause an alcohol poisoning fatality is 0.3%, right?
Right.
But you'd also agree with me in saying that there's absolutely zero evidence that Genesis's BAC ever even came close to that point, right?
No, I would not. We have really no idea what Genesis Petrillo's peak BAC was. So I can't tell you that her BAC never reached a point that is higher than 0.16.
Okay, now I'd like to move on to another alternative that you discussed, allergic reaction. Now, you'd agree with me in saying that had Genesis suffered an allergic reaction, there should have been some sort of physical marker that she was in anaphylaxis, right?
Right. There usually is a rash or some sort of physical marker.
And none of this was noted on Genesis's chart, was it?
No, it was not. I just wanted to include all relevant possibilities.
And you'd agree with me in saying that Genesis had no known allergies, right?
Right, as far as he knew. However, again, he had not gotten regular health checkups.
And the allergic reaction wouldn't explain Genesis's low levels of acetylcholinesterase?
No, that's very indicative of liver disease instead.
Or the presence of pesticides in Genesis's system?
Yes, or that.
Now, a third potential cause of death was, as you mentioned, liver disease. But you don't know why this would have been fatal on its own, do you?
No, I don't.
In fact, the only explanation that you can provide as far as the fatality of liver disease is that it could have been exacerbated by pesticides?
That's correct. That's why I included the possibility of liver disease.
Okay, now the final alternative that you provided was that Genesis somehow ingested the pesticide through some other vehicle, right?
Right.
And you would agree with me that the bottle was in fact the only item of food or drink that tested positive for organophosphates after the fact, correct?
That's correct.
And there were organophosphates found in Genesis's stomach.
They were.
Mixed with the wine.
They were.
The bottle of wine that later tested positive for organophosphates as well.
Right.
Thank you. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Does the plaintiff wish to conduct a brief redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Okay.
May I request that the witness can step down?
Okay. Dr. Cannon, you are excused, and the plaintiff may, or the defense may call their next witness when ready.
Your Honor, the defense calls Blair Osborne to the stand. Please introduce yourself to the jury, Ms. Osborne.
Hey y'all, my name is Blair Osborne. I'm a private event planner right here in Midlands, and I actually have my own private event company. It's called Bliss by Blair Events. I decided to call it Bliss because nothing makes me or my clients more blissful than seeing their dream events come to life.
And what kind of events, Ms. Osborne?
So I'm actually really lucky in that I get to be involved in all sorts of events, whether it's birthdays, retirement parties, or work retreats, or weddings. Maybe it's just because I've seen The Wedding Planner a few too many times and I envision myself as Jennifer Lopez, but weddings are definitely my favorite and my specialty.
And have you ever organized an event at Peony Estates?
Yes, many times. So my work with them began in 2015, and since then I've been able to host about 82 events there.
And were you working on any particular events in June of last year at Peony Estates?
Yes, I was. I was actually in charge of planning the wedding of Genesis Petrillo and Casey Soto, which was such a sad ending to what could have been a beautiful beginning of the rest of their lives together.
Now, can you walk us through what happened the night before the wedding?
Yeah, so the night before the wedding is a typical rehearsal style dinner. So a huge and lovely, beautiful dinner with many courses, and then come the toast, and then come the desserts.
And what happened after the dinner and the toasts?
So, following the toast, Harper presented the most beautiful bottle of wine to Genesis. And it really seemed like she was trying to smooth things over between them. And I'll admit, it made me a bit emotional. Maybe because I don't have the best relationship with my mother in law, but it really seemed like she was trying to make peace between them.
And what do you mean by make peace?
Well, throughout the wedding planning process, there had been a lot of little instances of bickering, miscommunications, things like that between Harper and Genesis. But it really seemed to me, based on what Harper said and how she was acting, that she wanted to make peace at this time.
Objection, Your Honor, this time to lack of personal knowledge.
Does the defense have a response?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Osborne is speaking from a rationally based perspective. As the wedding planner, she is observed and is testifying based on her interaction with the two. And as mentioned before, she observed Martini attempting to bury the hatchet in the form of this bottle of wine.
Your Honor, if I may be heard.
Yes, briefly.
I believe I heard the witness say that Harper intended to bury the hatchet or to make peace between them. And I believe that is she's not supposed to be able to do that because she is speculating into the mindset of Harper and what she intended to do and not her actions.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask that you limit the testimony to that a gift was given. To speculate as to the intent of that gift would be lack of personal knowledge from the witness. So I will sustain that objection.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, what happened next, Ms. Osborne?
So as the night went on, all the guests kind of trickled back to their rooms. And I'd say by around midnight, all the guests were back in their room, except for a few.
And how long did you remain at the estates this evening?
So I stayed for a little while longer, just to help clean and make sure everything was in its correct place. And as I was doing so, I noticed Genesis and Drew talking by a cocktail table, as well as Angel.
And you said a few people were left, intentionally Drew and who exactly was still there with you at this time?
So a bunch of the staff, as well as Genesis, Angel, and Drew. And to me, from the way I was talking to them, and because I've seen, frankly, a lot of intoxicated guests of events, it seemed like Genesis and Angel were on the more intoxicated spectrum, whereas Drew seemed to be sober.
Objection, Your Honor, at this time to lack of personal knowledge.
Like you said, lack of personal knowledge.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yeah, I tend to. If you lay the foundation as to how they seemed intoxicated, I will allow that testimony. If the witness saw anything about the behavior, body motions, anything like that, would be able to establish that foundation.
Yes, Your Honor. As mentioned before, having a rationally based perception, she is testifying based on the interaction as to what she witnessed directly in front of Genesis. She witnessed Genesis not acting like her normal self and drew the conclusion that something was askew. Most notably due to the fact that she'd been drinking wine. This most likely would have been alcohol.
Your Honor, may I be heard?
You may.
The witness said that Genesis appeared to be on the more drunk side. While she said she's witnessed people being drunk before, she laid no foundation as to how she would know what level of drunkenness Genesis or any other individual could be at.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I agree. I sustain the objection. I think if you can provide anything as to her behavior and how that would lay the foundation that she was on the intoxicated side, I will allow that testimony. But I need you to give those facts first. So sustain for now.
Ms. Osborne, when did you leave that night?
So, like I said earlier, I was talking with Genesis and Drew, and the way they were talking to me, their words were kind of slurred and they seemed pretty out of it. And so I thought that they might be intoxicated. So I told them, to drink some water so they would be better in the morning. And then after that, I just finished wrapping up the cleaning and then headed home.
Ms. Osborne, please explain what you witnessed the next morning, the day of the wedding.
Yeah, so I woke up bright and early as usual. I got up around 6:30 is when I got to the venue. And as I was setting up, I saw Harper there around 7:15, I would say.
And what was Harper doing at this time?
She was just drinking her coffee, watching how everything was being set up. And when I asked her how she was feeling, she said, "I just want this day to be perfect for Casey. I just want the wedding to be as wonderful as their marriage would be."
And when did you and Harper become aware of what had happened to Genesis?
So as time passed, we were aware that they were missing, but we didn't really know what had happened until later.
So what happened next?
Then we learned the tragic news that Genesis had passed.
And how did Harper react to this?
She was so shocked she could barely say anything. I didn't even hear her speak. I mean, I can't say I'd react differently if I just learned that my child was so close to getting married to the love of their life, and then they passed away.
And what happened when you found out that Harper had been charged with battery in the death of Genesis?
Honestly, I was just so shocked from the many different times that I've worked with Harper and Peony Estates, as well as just knowing Casey and Harper's relationship. The fact that anyone would accuse Harper of being involved in this just baffled and saddened me.
No further questions.
Cross-exam?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Blair.
Good afternoon.
You would consider yourself a successful business person, right?
Yes, I would.
And you've planned and coordinated numerous successful events in the past,
Yes, sir, I have.
including several weddings, as you mentioned.
Yes, like I said, I absolutely love weddings.
But this wedding had a few oddities that set it apart, correct?
Yeah, unfortunately, things can happen in the planning of weddings, a ton of logistics between a lot of different parties, so things can get a little bit confusing and hectic for sure.
One of these oddities was the fact that the bride and groom had no idea that you were planning their wedding.
Yeah, that's true. At the very beginning, when Harper contacted me, it seemed like she was trying to surprise them or something, which I thought was cool. And she was
Directing me back to my question, one of the oddities was the fact that the bride and groom had no idea that you were planning their wedding.
Yes, as I said, it seemed odd to me, but it seemed like Harper was kind of creating some sort of fun surprise with them, so I liked it.
In fact, the only one of that group that knew you were planning the wedding was the defendant herself.
Yeah,
She set the place for the wedding.
yes, she wanted to have it in Peony Estates.
She even paid you extra to stay discreet.
Yes, like I said, it seemed to me like she was creating this big surprise.
Meaning that you weren't allowed to reach out to Casey and involve her in any of the planning of the wedding, correct?
She didn't really outline the specifics to me, just to stay discreet, and so I took that to mean not telling anyone about it.
Surely this isn't normal practice for planning a wedding, correct?
No, it definitely happens sometimes.
It's normal practice when planning a wedding to be paid an extra 15% to work on the preparations in secret.
Sometimes it can happen, yeah, for sure. Depending on who's involved and if they want it to be a surprise or like a destination wedding, that can definitely affect my rates.
Miss Blair, it wasn't until about 6 months before the wedding that you actually got to meet with Genesis and Casey, correct?
Yes, that was in January of 2019.
Following this meeting, you observed several instances of disagreement between the defendant and Genesis.
Yeah, that's true. They didn't always agree on some of the decorations that we chose or, some of the food choices, stuff like that.
And this conflict continued regularly the months leading up to the time of the wedding.
Yeah, they just had differing opinions on things, I'd say.
Now, Miss Blair, as you said earlier, you're pretty good at what you do.
I'd consider myself, yeah.
And you've planned several successful weddings in the past, 61 of them to be exact by the time of the Petrillo wedding.
Yes, 61 weddings.
This wedding was one of the more chaotic ones, though, right?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Maybe one of the worst weddings in your professional experience?
Yeah, I mean, it ended in the death of someone. I would definitely consider that one of the worst weddings in my experience.
Would you say one of the main problems were the disagreements between Harper and Genesis in planning the wedding?
Yeah, I'd say their difference of opinions on the logistics of the wedding was definitely an obstacle to our planning.
Now, you met with Casey and Harper on May 11th, 2019, correct?
Yes.
And it was during this meeting that Harper played a voicemail in your presence.
If I recall correctly, I think that's right. Yes,
And this voicemail was from Genesis,
I believe so.
who, from what you could tell, was drunk at the time.
Yeah, I couldn't hear the voicemail like super well. I was kind of scratching in and out, but
Objection, speculation. Your Honor, the counsel is asking the witness to speculate to an answer she does not, the question she does not know the answer to.
Your Honor, if I may be heard,
Yes.
I simply asked the witness if, in her rationally based perspective, if the witness was drunk. She is free to say no if she does not believe he was drunk at the time of this voicemail. I'm not asking her to speculate. I'm asking her perception on whether he was drunk or not at the time.
I agree. He can ask her, I guess, if she knew that he was drunk. If she doesn't know, then she doesn't have that personal knowledge. I will allow the question.
Now, Ms. Blair, asking you again, Genesis at this time, from what you heard, was drunk, correct?
well, I have no way of knowing for sure if he was drunk. I wasn't there. And the message was a little bit scratchy, but from what I could tell and given the context of the event, it seemed to me that way. But again, I can't be sure.
And Harper's response to this voicemail, when you heard it played, was one of these days, Genesis will drink the wrong thing and it will kill Genesis, correct?
Yeah, I really wasn't sure what she meant by that. I thought it might have to do with the fact that that Genesis was drunk, but I really didn't know.
Surely this must have seemed fairly odd to you, correct?
It seemed a little bit odd, but again, I didn't know the circumstances of all of this.
Now, during that same meeting, Harper got a call.
Yes,
During this call, Harper appeared angry.
to me, yes.
You heard the words "care bottle" during this call.
I believe so.
You heard the word pesticide during this call.
I did.
You heard Harper say, "No, keep the care bottle where it is. No, don't have them move the pesticide."
I think I heard that, yeah.
Now, Ms. Blair, moving on to June 7th, 2019, this was the day of the rehearsal dinner, correct?
Yes, it was.
And Harper and Genesis were arguing constantly.
Yeah, they were bickering again about details.
There was almost a whole day of constant disagreements and insults between the two.
It seemed to me that that was the case, yes.
Then the defendant suddenly became cordial to Genesis
Yes.
and gifted him a special bottle of wine from the winery.
Yeah, it really touched me. Like I was saying, it really seemed like Harper was eager to smooth things over.
I'm sure this was a relief after all the previous conflict, right?
Oh, absolutely.
But of course, this sudden change of heart must have been quite unexpected to you.
It surprised me, but honestly, I was just really happy to see them trying to make amends before the wedding.
Ms. Blair, directing you back to my question, it came as quite unexpected to you, the sudden change of heart.
Yeah, it seemed unexpected to me, but I was super excited about it.
Now, Ms. Blair, you found out about the death of Genesis Petrillo the morning of the wedding, correct?
Yes,
And you witnessed the defendant being told of Genesis's death.
I did.
The defendant had no response to this news.
Yeah, like I said, she couldn't even speak.
There was no shocked verbal expressions.
No, like I said, she was speechless.
There were no verbal outbursts of pain or grief.
No, she didn't speak.
The defendant remained silent.
Yeah.
Your Honor, I have no further questions at this time.
Does the defense wish to do a brief redirect of the witness?
No.
In that case, Ms. Osborne, you are excused and may step down. And the defense can call their next witness when ready.
Yes, Your Honor. We call Harper Martini to the stand. May I continue?
Yes, you may proceed.
Please introduce yourself for the court.
My name is Harper Martini.
Ms. Martini, where do you live?
I live in Midlands at the Peony Estates Winery. That's both my home address and my place of employment.
What do you do at Peony Estates?
Well, first and foremost, I own the Peony Estates Winery and the bed and breakfast, but I also oversee the day-to-day business operations and the production of the wine. Peony Estates is my pride and joy.
Ms. Martini, how did you first get into the winemaking business?
I graduated from Midland State University in 1990 with a double major in horticulture and business, and my timing just couldn't have been better. The wine industry in Midlands took off, and I decided to get involved as well.
Now, Ms. Martini, who is your daughter?
My daughter's name is Casey. Casey is my whole world. I love her more than anything, and I'll support her through everything.
And how do you know Genesis Petrillo?
He was my daughter's fiance.
How was your relationship with Genesis?
It was never good. He was disrespectful. It was honestly horrific. I'm Casey's mother, and he just had absolutely no regard for me. I feared that he was talking bad about me to Casey and forcing her to become really, really distant.
How did you react when they told you the news of their engagement?
Honestly, I was shocked. I could not believe that Casey was willing to marry a man that held so much discontent for her mother. However, nevertheless, I tried to show them as much support as I possibly could. I was extremely involved with the wedding. I even threw them an engagement party and offered to hold it at my winery.
Well, what happened after the engagement party?
I looked in the mirror and I had a long talk with myself. I had finally come to terms with the fact that Casey was never going to let Genesis go, and that if I was going to keep Casey in my life, that meant Genesis was going to have to be part of it too. So I swallowed my pride and asked Genesis to come to lunch with me.
How did that lunch go?
Genesis didn't even show up. I honestly couldn't believe it. Here I was extending my arm out to him to become my family, and he doesn't even bother to acknowledge me. If I didn't love my daughter as much as I do, I would have completely stopped trying at that exact moment.
Ms. Martini, I want to move on to May 12th, 2019. What happened early that morning?
Yeah, I could never forget that morning. It was a mother's worst nightmare. Genesis had left me this voicemail. He was slurring a speech, saying absolutely insane things, that he wanted to take Casey away from me and move to Paris.
Would you recognize a transcript of this voicemail if I showed it to you today?
I can never forget it.
Your Honor, permission to screen share Exhibit 8 with the jury, and Your Honor.
You may.
Now, Ms. Martini, what did I just hand you or show you?
This is the transcript of the voicemail Genesis left me.
And as far as you know, is this an accurate transcript?
Yeah.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense moves Exhibit 8 into evidence. Per Stipulation 3, Exhibit 8 has been pre-admitted into court today.
Per the stipulation, we will allow this into evidence as Exhibit 8.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Martini, can you read lines 9 through 11 out loud for us?
Yeah, it says, Casey, me, our future kids, your grandkids, we're all going to live our lives as far away from you as possible. You'll never see any of us.
Ms. Martini, how did this make you feel?
I felt hopeless. It felt like my whole life was falling apart and there was nothing I could do to change the outcome. I was completely stuck. Genesis was threatening not only to take Casey away from me, but also demand that I never see my grandchildren. How could someone do that? I had no other choice left. If I did not make Genesis like me, appreciate me, respect me, anything of that nature, I was going to lose Casey and everything that I loved forever.
Ms. Martini, I want to move on to the day of June 7th, 2019. Can you walk us through what happened that day?
Yeah. Truthfully, that day went completely fine. Casey said this amazing toast, and I enjoyed myself. I even toasted to Genesis, thanking him for always being there for Casey. And I sealed my truce with one of my finest bottles of wine. I thought, that was it. That's all I could have done. If I was going to be involved in Casey's life now, it was going to be up to Genesis.
Then what did you do, Miss Martini?
I had left the dinner party at that point.
When did you receive word of Genesis being sick?
It was around 10:30 p.m. that night. One of my employees told me that one of the guests had been rushed to the hospital. I went to Genesis's room to see if it was him. He had a tendency of drinking a lot, and I saw that he was not in his room, and there was the empty bottle of my peace offering on the floor that I offered earlier.
Objection, Your Honor, more prejudicial than probative. The defendant is claiming that she believed that it was Genesis who was drunk at the time because of previous experience with Genesis.
Is it possible that you're objecting because they're trying to prove conformity with past behavior?
Yes, my mistake, Your Honor, that's correct.
Okay. Does the defense have a response to that?
Yes, Your Honor. The Harper Martini's, as stated, was told that someone was rushed to the hospital. She'd previously received a phone call from Genesis, sounding drunk and whatnot, and she made the assumption that she may have been drunk again that day. We're not trying to show this was actually in conformity therewith, but simply how Harper informed her actions that day and where Genesis may be.
I think if you tie the testimony together like that he'd been drunk earlier and then appeared drunk at that time, I'll allow it. But I think, as stated, that broad sweeping statement that he had a tendency to drink a lot, I'm not going to let that in.
Yes, Your Honor. No. Miss Martini, what did you do when your staff told you that someone had been rushed to the hospital that day?
Well, I went to where Genesis was staying to see if it was him. He was drinking a lot that evening, and so I went to go check. And I saw that he was not in his room, and there was the empty bottle of my peace offering that I left earlier.
Now, Miss Martini, do you have anything to do with the death of Genesis Petrillo?
Of course not. Now Casey won't even look or talk to me. She thinks I poisoned her fiance. All I ever wanted to be was in Casey's life, and that's why I'm here. I'm here to prove to her that I would never do anything like that.
Thank you. No further questions.
The defense may cross when ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mrs. Martini, did you plan in advance to give the bottle of car wine to Genesis that night?
Yes, I did. I wanted it to be a nice bottle, a nice peace offering. I only had 2.
Okay. And you saw Genesis drink the bottle of Cara on that night?
Yeah, I saw her drink a couple of glasses. I knew she had showed interest in the bottle before, so I thought it was the truth.
Thank you. And after you found the bottle that was empty in Genesis's room, you threw that bottle away in the trash, correct?
Yes, I did.
And there were empty canisters of pesticide in that trash can, correct?
Yes, I think there was.
Okay, thank you. How many types of pesticide are used at Peony Estates?
Just the one.
Objection.
And may I be heard, Your Honor?
You may.
Your Honor, this is relevant because I'm simply trying to establish the fact that this particular pesticide was the one that was involved in contaminating the car wine bottle.
May it be heard, Your Honor?
I apologize. The question was how many different kinds of pesticides are used on the mayor?
Yes. Yeah. The question was, yes, Your Honor, how many types?
Okay. I'll hear from the defense real quick.
Your Honor, how many pesticides that P&E states personally use and their practices with those different types of pesticides lends more towards an argument of negligence in today's case and how P&E states might have misused a different form of pesticides? We're discussing battery in today's trial, and therefore this is not relevant.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I'll allow questioning on the specific type of pesticide involved since we're addressing battery today. So sustained.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Were you aware of the fatal effects of consuming this particular organophosphate?
One of my employees had ingested some before, and I wasn't aware that it was fatal, but I knew it could make people sick.
And in that case, were there any visual signs of the pesticide in the wine?
No.
Okay. And you were incredibly close to Casey, correct?
Yeah, of course. She's my baby girl.
You said that you didn't approve of the relationship between Genesis and Casey, also correct?
No, I didn't at all.
And you told Casey what you thought of Genesis on several occasions, right?
Yes, but at some point, I can't control it anymore. I had to.
You also told Genesis.
Your Honor, I asked that my witness be allowed to finish her statement.
Yeah, just be mindful of letting the witness finish their statement before you follow up.
Yes, Your Honor. With that in mind, you also told Genesis what you thought of him as well, correct?
Yes. I mean, I'm not going to keep quiet about the person that my daughter might be marrying.
Okay. You were familiar with the voicemails that you left to Danny Francasio, correct?
Yes.
If I were to show you those voicemails today, would you be able to recognize them?
Yeah, I would.
Okay. Permission to show exhibits 18A through 18E to the defendant, Your Honor?
You may.
Thank you. Are these true and accurate transcriptions of those voicemails?
It looks like it. Yes.
Okay. Have any changes or alterations been made to these?
No, not that I can tell.
Okay. The plaintiff offers exhibits 18A through 18E, Your Honor. And you complained about Genesis's.
May I be allowed to see each piece of evidence that the plaintiff is attempting to offer before we move these into evidence?
Yes. Well, I apologize. What are the numbers? 18B through E?
18A through 18E, Your Honor.
Okay.
Can I have a moment? Do you guys mind just scrolling through those real quick?
No problem.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, you can go to the next one, please. Okay, the next one, please. Okay, the next one, please. The next one, please. Oh, thank you. Your Honor, at this time, I object to relevance. Specifically on email on 18D, Harper Martini is talking about pests that are on the P&E Estates property at that time. This would deal with how Harper might deal with those pests. This would go along with negligence, and therefore this piece of evidence wouldn't be relevant in today's case.
May I be heard, Your Honor?
Yeah, I want, if you could, I guess, just take us through how these make any of the facts of a battery case more or less likely. I think this might be tending more towards the negligence case.
Yes, Your Honor. Each of these individual voicemails holds a particular statement made by Harper Martini that points towards the relationship that she had with Genesis Petrillo at the time. And as a result, I would like to present those in order to further establish the relationship with Genesis. I can move on, Your Honor, if you prefer.
I will allow her to testify to the one specific statement related to Genesis. However, we will not publish these in their entirety to the jury.
Your Honor, I asked specifically that the statement she was referred to, just that one 18DA or whatever, be admitted and the rest not be admitted into actual evidence.
Can we see the statement on A?
Or
Please.
whichever one it is.
So the statement that you're objecting to is, or the one you're willing to let? I'm sorry, you're objecting to 18A, but
I'm objecting to all of them except for opposing counsel stated that there is a statement in here that deals with the relationship between Genesis and Harper Martini. If that is true, I'm not objecting to that specific 18A, B, C, or D, but the rest of them not be admitted into evidence specifically. I'm just not sure which one has the actual statement on it that opposing counsel is referring to.
okay. Yeah, I'm gonna limit the admissibility of these to those very specific statements about the relationship with Genesis. But otherwise, I'd ask that you not ask about the other contents in the documents.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you.
May I just ask which one of 18A, B, C, or D opposing counsel is planning to use?
Actually, Your Honor, each of these is involved in some way. Each of these holds a particular statement.
Okay. Yeah, okay, sorry. Yeah, we're gonna go with you may only ask about those statements specifically about Genesis, and everything else we're gonna sustain as irrelevant.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay.
All right, so let's continue then. And you complained about Genesis's behavior several times in those voicemails that we're looking at, correct, Ms. Martini?
Yeah, his behavior was horrific.
And you said that Genesis was a nightmare.
Yeah.
You likened Genesis to a cellar pest.
Yeah, we were dealing with pests at the time. But that was kind of a joke.
You called Genesis miserable and selfish?
Most selfish man I've ever met.
Okay. And you played for several individuals the voicemail that Genesis left you on the night of the pre-wedding party, correct?
The night of where she threatened to take away my future grandchildren? Yes, that one.
Permission, Your Honor, to show Exhibit 8 again?
You may.
Thank you. And in this particular voicemail, you were upset about Casey and Genesis moving to France, correct? That was your response?
Well, I wasn't only upset about that. I was upset that he had threatened to make sure I would never see my children or future grandchildren again. I'm pretty sure any rational person would be upset about that.
Because you wanted Casey to stay in Midlands with you, correct?
Well, yes, not only that, but I wanted to be able to see her. That's my baby.
All right. Are you familiar with the note that you left Genesis?
If I would see it, yes.
Okay. So if I were able to show you this note today, then you'd be able to recognize it, yes?
Yes, I would.
Okay. Permission to show Exhibit 24 to the defendant, Your
Honor. You may.
Okay. And is this a true and accurate depiction of the note that you wrote?
Yes, it is.
Right. And you stated in this note that if the money that was enclosed in the note was not...
Your Honor, I asked that this piece of evidence be entered into evidence before they refer to specific statements within it.
So if counsel would just enter this into evidence first, then you can question.
Thank you. Can this be entered into evidence, Your
Honor? Does the defense have any other objections to this?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. So admitted as Exhibit 24.
Thank you. And my final question is, you stated in this note that if this money wasn't taken, you would take Genesis out of the picture the hard way, correct?
Listen, I wrote this a week.
This is more prejudicial than probative, and this is cumulative evidence. The jury has ample time and can see this exhibit specifically. The opposing counsel is simply just reading off pieces of the evidence at this point, and that's more cumulative, and therefore this is more prejudicial than probative, this line of testimony.
Does the plaintiff have a response?
Your Honor, if I understand correctly, the more prejudicial than probative objective is typically used to say that that this is used to simply just make the defendant look bad. And Your Honor, I'm simply trying to establish a statement made by the defendant in this particular case and confirm that that was made by the defendant to Genesis Petrillo.
I guess the objection or the thrust of the objection is that this is simply cumulative given the statements that we have already heard in evidence. Is there a reason that this is not just building on those other statements? Is there something unique to this that makes it more probative?
Yes, Your Honor. And that is the fact that there is both a bribe and a threat enclosed in this note.
Okay. I understand where the defense is coming from, but I think the fact that this has that unique piece of evidence, the threat and the bribe, I'm gonna allow it.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
No, she didn't answer.
I didn't have a chance to explain myself.
Oh, my apologies. If the defendant could please finish their answer to this question.
Yeah, as I was saying, I was not in the best headspace at this time. I wrote this note about a week after the voicemail about taking my kid. But I didn't end up harming Genesis. I didn't do anything. I didn't even take back the money. She ended up taking the money, and I didn't even do anything about that. She had $300,000 and was still involved with her life. I can't do anything more. I just knew I had to be on her good side. And that was that.
All right. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
If the defense has remaining time, do you wish to do a brief redirect?
I have no redirect, Your Honor. I just asked my witness to be allowed to step down.
All right. Ms. Martini, you are excused.
Can I ask for a brief 5-minute recess before closing? If that's all right.
I think we're doing okay on time. If everyone is okay with reconvening at 4:28, we will go through closing statements.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, is everybody ready to proceed to closing statements?
Yes, Your
Yes,
Honor.
Your Honor.
So plaintiff side, you may proceed when ready.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury, may it please the court. We are here today to discuss the death of an innocent person. The responsibility of that death lays in the hands of one individual, the defense, Harper Martini. The burden of proof lays with the plaintiff to illustrate a preponderance of evidence. Imagine 2 buckets of water on the scales of justice. In order to prove preponderance of evidence, if there is at least 1 teardrop more of evidence against the defense than for her, then you must find the defendant liable for battery. Additionally, according to Burdett v. Copenhaver, it is the duty of a plaintiff in a battery case to illustrate 3 elements: an act by a defendant, an intent to cause harmful contact on the behalf of that defendant, and actual harmful contact done to the plaintiff. Throughout the course of this trial, we have been presented with testimony after testimony of the bad blood between the defendant and Genesis Petrillo. Your Honor, the opposing counsel would like you to believe that Harper Martini sought peace, but it's clear that the simplest way for Martini to create peace was simply to take Genesis Petrillo out of the picture. You see, Harper Martini had a problem, she had a plan, and she used the poison. Let's take a moment to examine the facts at our disposal. First, we must understand that the relationship between Genesis Petrillo and Harper Martini always had an intense degree of animosity. We heard first from Ms. Angel Rodriguez, direct examined by my co-counsel Travis Pico, who painted a clear picture of an excited couple whose plans were changed, twisted, and ultimately failed by the defendant. Mr. Petrillo and Ms. Martini had been disagreeable and even antagonistic towards one another through this planning process. And on many separate occasions, the defendant stated her intense dislike and disapproval of Genesis. In her testimony, Ms. Soto showed us her mother's continual complaints of Genesis, including immediately after Ms. Martini was made aware of the proposal. Ms. Soto saw that the defendant was upset, enraged, and panicked. These facts are further illustrated through the voicemail left for the defendant on the night of May 11th, 2019 by Genesis Petrillo, witnessed by both Ms. Soto and Ms. Rodriguez on separate occasions. Ms. Martini, the voicemail, according to both testimonies, noted that Ms. Martini heard Genesis and Casey's intentions to eventually move to France after the wedding. In my examination of Casey Soto, Ms. Soto noted that the defendant's reaction to this voicemail was clearly negative. She was upset, she was angry at Genesis, and she was afraid of losing Casey. Angry and desperate enough to attempt battery against Genesis to prevent the wedding from happening. Overall, we can see that there was an intent to harm or to cause harmful contact on the behalf of the defendant. Therefore, we have met the first element of battery. On the night of the wedding, Ms. Rodriguez saw the defendant heading toward the kitchen holding a can of pesticide, joking that it was for Genesis because Genesis is such a pest. Afterwards, Ms. Martini gave Genesis a bottle of 2019 Carl wine as a supposed extension of the olive branch. Ms. Soto also pointed this event out as noteworthy, stating that it was surprising considering Ms. Martini's feelings towards Genesis before that. Both Ms. Soto and Ms. Rodriguez found this action odd. Furthermore, according to the examination of Dr. Kwan by my co-counsel Addison Pruitt, there's enough evidence to conclude to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty that the 2019 Cara bottle of wine ingested by Genesis on the night before his wedding was the exact source of the pesticide that caused the death of Genesis Petrillo. So as we can see, there was an act by the defendant clearly present. And as a result, the second element of battery is met. But later in the night, Ms. Rodriguez became concerned with Genesis's sudden, intense illness. After driving Genesis to the hospital, Ms. Rodriguez rushed home to inform the party of Genesis's state of coma at the time. But the defendant, shockingly, made a statement that implied that she was already aware of the poisoning of Genesis Petrillo before Ms. Rodriguez was even able to tell anyone about the state of coma. According to Ms. Soto, after this, she and Ms. Rodriguez rushed back to the hospital, but they were a few minutes too late. Genesis Petrillo was already gone. Miss Soto stood mourning by the bedside of her lover in her wedding dress. In his examination of Genesis, Dr. Kwan found that the cause of Genesis's death was almost entirely and clearly due to organophosphate poisoning. While the original signs and symptoms that he examined seemed to indicate some form of alcohol poisoning, he realized that it must have been organophosphate poisoning by this pesticide afterwards. Additionally, he asked for a toxicology report, which eventually further confirmed this to be true. So as we can see, the harmful contact to Genesis was done by this particular pesticide. This is the final element. Members of the jury, we have proven by a preponderance of the evidence that the defendant is liable for battery. We have shown you the strong evidence that Harper Martini disliked Genesis Petrillo, wanted to get rid of Genesis Petrillo in order to keep her daughter with her. We have shown that the bottle of 2019 Cara was poisoned by the defendant, and we have also shown you that that poison was the eventual cause of Genesis Petrillo's death. We have met our burden in today's case, but the defendant simply has not. They called Dr. Cannon to show you possible alternatives to Genesis's death, but Dr. Cannon was literally paid to prove that pesticides were not the cause of death. Despite every conceivable cause of Genesis's death being examined by Dr. Cannon really only showed you how unlikely any of these alternatives were. They also called Blair Osborne to prove the defendant's focus on planning a successful wedding, but really they showed their focus in dislike of Genesis. And finally, they called the defendant herself, who was discovered not only to have berated, slandered, and bribed Mr. Petrillo, but outright threatened him in the most extreme fashion. Your Honor, members of the jury, Harper Martini had a problem, made a plan, and used the poison. It is for these reasons that we ask you to find the defendant liable for battery against Genesis Petrillo. Thank you.
The defense may proceed when ready.
Yes, Your Honor. Permission to pull up Exhibit 8 before I begin my closing as well.
Yeah, you may.
Thank you. May I proceed?
Yes, proceed when ready.
Members of the jury, Harper Martini just wanted peace. On the night of May 12th, 2019, Genesis was out at the Black Bear Casino celebrating his recent engagement and having a good time. In the spirit of celebration and partying, he spent the night drinking and hanging out with friends and future family. And in the morning of May 12th, 2019, his speech slurred, his inhibitions lowered, Genesis made a call to Harper Martini. And in this call, Genesis told Harper how he really felt. Quote, find someone else to run your sad little winery. Casey doesn't want it. No one wants it. You'll die alone at that sad place, and no one will care. Members of the jury, this saddened Harper Martini. This frustrated her. This made her feel hopeless because all Harper Martini wanted was peace. Not to harm Genesis Petrillo, not to split up Casey and Genesis and end their marriage, but to simply make peace with someone who would soon become family to them. Now, members of the jury, despite this, the plaintiff has charged Harper Martini with battery in today's case. Now, there's 3 elements to battery that I want to remind the jury of. First, the plaintiff must prove that there was an act that occurred by Harper Martini. Second, the plaintiff must show that this act was intended to cause harm or offense to Genesis Petrillo. And third, the plaintiff must show that there was an actual offense or harm caused to Genesis Petrillo, which eventually led to her death. And members of the jury, the plaintiffs must do this with a burden of preponderance of the evidence. Now, contrary to what opposing counsel told you in his closing, the defense holds no burden today. The burden is solely on the plaintiff to prove that it was more likely than not that Harper Martini intended to harm Genesis Petrillo. But as Harper's own daughter told you, She would never harm Genesis Petrillo. That's because Harper Martini just wanted peace. Now, members of the jury, in order to recount the facts of today's case, I want to work backwards through each of these elements of battery with you. Now, the first element that we'll deal with is whether or not an actual harm or offense occurred to Genesis Petrillo. Now, the plaintiff and their expert, Dr. Kwan, who actively advocates against pesticides, would like you to believe that there is no other reasonable medical explanation for Genesis Petrillo's death except for organophosphate, the pesticides found on Peony Estate. But members of the jury, our expert, Dr. Cannon, came before you today and offered you 3 other explanations for the death of Genesis Petrillo. First, it is well likely that Genesis Petrillo had a higher BAC than Dr. Kwan measured that night of June 7th. If her peak BAC, Dr. Cannon told us that over time, the liver breaks down the blood alcohol content, and therefore Genesis's BAC could have been much higher that night and caused the symptoms and eventual respiratory arrest from alcohol poisoning. Second, Dr. Cannon told us that Genesis Petrillo could have simply had an allergic reaction to something else at the buffet or something else she drank that night on June 7th. Genesis never really went for checkups with the doctor and could have easily had one of these underlying causes that caused an allergic reaction on June 7th, 2019. And third, Genesis Petrillo could have easily had underlying hepatic disease that also went diagnosed throughout the course of her life. We heard from Dr. Cannon that on the night of June 7th, Genesis Petrillo had low acetylcholinase levels, which could lead to constrained eyes, which are the same symptoms of a reaction to hepatic disease. Because Genesis Petrillo never went in to get checkups of whether or not she may have had hepatic disease, we simply can't conclude that the harm or offense incurred on Genesis Petrillo was more likely than not pesticide poisoning. Now, I want to move on to the second element of battery, was that Harper intended to act or to harm Genesis Petrillo. Well, quite frankly, members of the jury, the facts don't point to an intent to harm Genesis today. They point to Miss Martini trying to welcome Genesis into her family. You heard from Miss Rodriguez that on that night, Harper was making jokes during her toast, seemed welcoming, and even offered a special bottle of wine to Genesis to bury the hatchet between them. You heard that Miss Osborne, the wedding planner, was moved to tears by Harper Martini's toast on that night because it sounded so sincere. And you even heard from Casey Soto, Harper's own daughter, that Harper offered to pay for the entirety of the wedding and host and plan the entirety of the wedding in order to welcome Genesis into her family. These are the malice acts or acts intended to create harm. They're acts intended to create peace, members of the jury. And finally, I want to move on to that act specifically, the first element of battery. Now, members of the jury, if you think back through all the witnesses, Ms. Rodriguez, Ms. Osborne, either of the experts, none of them told you that they actually saw Harper put the pesticide into the wine. But we did hear of another act that occurred that night. Well, Ms. Rodriguez told you that Harper went out of her way to give Genesis a specific peace offering of the car bottle of wine. Ms. Osborne saw that she also went out of her way to offer her this bottle of wine, and that was the act that Harper took on that night. See, the only act we really have seen throughout today and have evidence of throughout today's trial is the act of peace by Harper Martini to give Genesis the bottle of wine and welcome him into her family. You see, members of the jury, this case isn't about a plan. This case isn't about a problem. This case isn't about a poison. This case is simply about peace. And Harper Martini only wanted peace. Find her not liable for battery. Thank you.
Does the plaintiff wish to make a rebuttal?
Yes, Your Honor, but could I have a time check first?
The time actually ended.
Okay, then no time for rebuttal.
Okay, I'm sure it would have been a eloquent rebuttal.
Thank you, sir.
Hear it. All right, everybody can breathe. That was a very good round. You should all be proud of yourselves. There was a lot of good stuff in there. I guess we actually are done with a fair amount of time left. So if you guys want any feedback, I guess me and my fellow judge can try to provide some.
Yeah, I don't know what the protocol is for Zoom stuff, whether or not we still do comments and whatnot. If someone wants to correct me.
Yes, we actually, the last round, the judges gave comments. Y'all just need to make sure that you send off your ballots and get the all clear before you start giving comments.
Okay, I'll go ahead and submit my ballot, and then we'll try to give you guys some specific comments. I won't drone on too long though.
Thank you.
Okay. So my name is Blake. I am a 3L here at Wake Forest Law School. I'm on the trial team here. So I also do a lot of this. I just haven't had the chance to do it over Zoom yet. And so you guys did a great job. Okay. So I'll try to keep the comments quick. You guys did a great job during the introductions and the housekeeping matters. The point there is just to kind of seem like you know what you're doing, and everybody came across well, so I thought that was good. Let's see. Both of the openers, you guys did a good job of not actually getting argumentative and talking about the evidence, but kind of cluing people in and what to look for. I think the plaintiff's opener said something like, hey, pay attention to the poison, look at where it ends up, stuff like that. You really want to cue the jurors into and also the defense opener, they're going to show you the evidence that the plaintiff ignored. You really want to cue the jury in on kind of things that are going to be important later on, but you can't quite discuss that evidence there at the beginning. You guys did a great job of that. I think you all did a good job of adapting when you maybe lost an objection or you didn't quite get the answer from a witness you thought you were going to get, which was good. Another question I guess I have, are we, for this competition, are you guys just allowed to assume that the expert witnesses have already been tendered? Or is that just,
yes. Yeah.
That's a rule? Okay. Let's see. Okay, Rodriguez direct. Whoever directed, I'm sorry, I'm reading these notes now. It's been like 2 hours. Whoever directed Rodriguez, you lost an objection or two, but you did a good job of kind of recovering and going from there. The cross of Rodriguez. I'm not sure if that problem child question actually helps your case or not. I can't remember what the exact question was, but I remember thinking I'm not sure if this is helping your theory. Everybody that directed an expert witness did a great job with the 702 stuff, just getting through their qualifications. I know it's not the most exciting part of the trial, but did a good job with that. Also, the Quan direct, that was good work. I think you did a good job. There were like 3 questions. What are the symptoms of alcohol poisoning? And do these line up? And I think the answer was like no, no, and no, which was, I thought that was a great moment in the trial. Whoever played Soto as a witness, good job. I was really buying into the story there. Let's see what else. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just gonna skip to the end. Yeah, all the crosses and directs were good. I think my main notes are, I guess, maybe on the closings. Closer for the plaintiff, you want to kind of have your story at the beginning. You kind of just jumped, I think, like into the burden of proof. And also, you guys don't need to cite case law in your statements. If you're talking to a jury or somebody, they're not, that's going to fly right over their head. I love the theme, the problem, the poison, and the plan. But that's like the first thing out of your mouth when you're giving a statement. So you get up there, boom, your theme, tell your story, and then kind of get into the evidence. Let's see. And closing on D, or closing for defense. So it was a good closing. The only note I have for the defense, I don't think that letter I think that's way better evidence for the plaintiff, that really mean voicemail. I think that almost for the plaintiff side, I guess maybe at least my reading of it, but I think that almost, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But like our point of like presenting that was to show that like Genesis, like, cause like the entire time they're like, oh, Harper has been like interfering with the wedding and whatnot, and like being just not a good person like overall, and like putting strain on the relationship. But I guess the whole point was kind of show it was really Genesis doing that and like give more credibility back to Harper and take credibility away from Genesis, because like she is the victim, or he is the victim, obviously in today's case. But she's like all these mean voicemails and stuff. But I mean, if it didn't hit, it didn't. That didn't.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, I've done stuff like that. It happens. I think almost that fits in like she had a problem part of the plaintiff's case. Like if y'all wanted to use that, but you had a really good kind of segment where you said, it was a beautiful toast. She gives this peace offering. I think that's maybe what you want to go with for your note. She just wanted peace. I don't know if you have actual testimony from the toast, but maybe tell that story, because I think that gets way more at what you guys were trying to establish there.
Thank you.
Also, you had a really good line right towards the end where you flipped their theme. There's no plan, there's no poison, there's no pill. She just wants peace. Also, they all start with P. It's an alliteration, and you're flipping their theme. So I thought that was really good. But a really solid trial, guys. This was very good. I was impressed by everybody. And if the other judge wants to give some feedback, I'll get out of the way.
Sure. I think this was a great trial as well. Good job to you guys. I know it's early in the season, so hopefully you have some good thoughts on what to improve going into the next tournament. I'll try to keep this pretty brief. I know you guys want to get dinner, go home, whatever it is. I'll mostly just touch on some major things I noticed throughout trial. I have a lot more specific feedback in my written comments. What I did for the written comments is, unfortunately, the form they gave us would only allow me to write one line. So instead, I typed things out on a document. If someone from each team wants to drop an email in the chat, I can send you the document.
I can give you my email if you want me to.
Okay. Yeah, I tried to be pretty detailed, so hopefully there's some stuff in there that could be helpful. I guess first of all, I'll introduce myself. My name's Liam. I am not a real attorney or a real judge, but I've done a lot of mock. I competed for 8 years, 4 years in high school. I competed for 4 years at Furman in AMPTA. Competed several times at nationals. I also currently am the head coach of a high school team at Atlanta International School. I will say this is now that I think the third time I've seen this case, and I haven't read the case, so I probably can't offer much feedback specifically on the details of the case and what you pursued or could have pursued. I have, however, seen a number of rounds of online mock at this point. I judged over the summer at TBC, coached at the Gladiator. I've seen a few scrimmages, so hopefully I can give more feedback about sort of the particularities of online mock trial and the style in that regard. The first thing I'll mention is themes. I think the defense, I wasn't quite sure what your theme was. That's either a problem of you not having a theme or your theme not being clear enough. So if you did have a theme, I don't think it really came across clearly, and I would make it a lot more obvious. That's just something in mock trial that judges are going to look out for that theme. And if you don't have that theme, if they can't tell what it is, you might be dinged a couple points. For the plaintiff, your theme, the problem, the plan, the poison, I thought that was awesome. That's a great theme. The one thing I would say is I would try to integrate it a bit more throughout your case. I heard it in the opening. I think I could have heard it a little bit earlier in statements. That could have been helpful. I think it could have been brought up a few more times in statements. And then I think you could have woven it throughout the directs and the crosses as well. And I think that would turn what is a good theme into a really effective theme. The next thing I'll mention is sort of the Zoom customs. I know this is a little bit different from what you guys are used to in real trial, or I say real trial, but real physical mock trial. I think you need to really think about what you want to do in terms of things like standing, sitting, positioning cameras, things like that. My advice would be, I think attorneys should stand for statements and crosses and probably directs. The only reason I would not stand for directs is if it just feels a lot more natural sitting, but otherwise I would stand for directs. I would sit down for housekeeping matters. I would sit down for objections if you're already sitting. If you're already standing, I would keep standing for objections. That's sort of the custom I've seen so far in a lot of the top rounds I've seen of online mock trial, and that's probably what I would go for. Also play around with things like your background, where you position your camera, lighting, things like that. All of that can make a little bit of a difference. On that subject as well, if you think that online mock trial is your opportunity to just have your script up and read from it while you're doing your direct or your cross, you're wrong. We can absolutely tell as judges when you're reading 90% of the time. I noticed it looked like a couple folks were reading for portions of the trial, so make sure you have that down. Along with sort of online customs, online mock trial customs, I think one of the things that's the most difficult in online mock trial is how to deal with exhibits, because exhibits are dealt with a little bit differently than you would in real life. I don't know if you've gotten any guidance from AMTA or from your tournament hosts or from your coaches or whatever about how to introduce exhibits. And if you have, ignore my comments, but I would not screen share an exhibit you're about to enter with the jury or screen share it until it's actually in evidence. I think that's improper because you're showing it to the jury, you're publishing it before it's in evidence. I would, if screen sharing is the only way to do it, I would ask for the jury to essentially be constructively sent out for that portion, or say you're constructively sharing it with the judge. Otherwise, what I've done in competition so far is ask the witness to pull up the exhibit on their computer. I don't know if tournament hosts are going to give an instruction for witnesses to keep exhibits pulled up on the computer, but I think if they are, just ask the witness to pull it up on the computer so that you're not showing it to the jury before it's in evidence. Keep up with what exhibits are in evidence and which ones aren't as well. I know that there are several exhibits that have been pre-admitted by the court. These exhibits are already in evidence. You don't need to then authenticate them and enter them into evidence again. I would, however, mention in pretrial that there are a number of exhibits admitted by the court and list what those exhibits are. A couple more things. One is objections. I think that, sometimes the objections were really great. There were a few places where it seemed like we weren't quite sure what to object to, or objections kind of switched a little bit. I think I'd really focus on making sure you think through all of the possible objections you would get and think through how you'd respond to everything. I wouldn't offer to withdraw objections or move on if you're not quite sure how to respond. I think it's better to just go ahead and give an answer and sound confident, even if it's not the right answer, than to offer to just move on. And on that note as well, on objections, make sure you think about how you want to structure your arguments and objections. I know that often doesn't get as much thought in mock trial, but I think you want to be explicitly clear with, state your objection, state the grounds for the objection, the testimony, the rule, how the rule applies to the testimony. Make sure you have that structure so your arguments are as clear as possible. Sometimes it seemed like objection arguments started to wander a little bit, or maybe switched from one objection to the next and went back and forth. So I think that would be helpful. The final thing I'll mention is, I mentioned this in my first trial as well. One of the things that people might not realize competing in mock trial, because I imagine you probably haven't judged rounds of mock trial before, is that for judges, especially for judges who aren't intimately familiar with the case, most of your judges aren't going to be very familiar with the case. It can be a little bit difficult to keep up with exactly what happened, exactly what the charges are, what the arguments are, what all the, what was alleged on each date, etc. So I think one of the exercises you want to go through is to try to simplify as much as possible for the judges. I think that, first of all, you want to have that narrative and that storytelling up front and carry it throughout the trial. One thing I thought was really good in this trial is, I think, the P opener. That was Addison. I thought you did a really good job of telling that story up front in your opening. The first 60 seconds probably of your opening were excellent. I could really understand what story you're telling and exactly how these pieces of the case fit together. I would have liked to see a little bit of that from the defense as well. And then I would have liked to, as you build your case and carry throughout your directs and your crosses, whenever you, for instance, have names that you talk about, remind the judges who those people are. Whenever you talk about dates, remind us why that date is important and what happened on that date. I think in the same category as if you're going to use complex terminology, say on the experts, always explain what these things are. There were a couple times when you did do that, but I still saw a couple technical terms thrown around without any explanation. And that's something that's going to lose a jury really quickly. On that same note, I think you have an added challenge with online mock trial in keeping your judge's attention. It's difficult enough for a judge who's never heard the case to listen to a 3-hour-long trial and pay attention to everything. It's even more difficult when you're staring at a computer screen for the whole time. And I think there are some things that you can do to try to keep judges' attention better. One is with greater use of exhibits. I would have liked to have seen a lot more use of exhibits throughout trial. I think there were only 2 exhibits we dealt with. I know that there are at least 23 exhibits because you entered exhibit 23. So presumably there are some other exhibits that you can throw in there and put them on the screen so that judges can really follow along. I'd like to see some more exhibit use in statements, particularly in your closings. Bring some of these exhibits in and mention them. Maybe even bring some demos in to tie the exhibits together. Since you have exhibits that have been pre-emitted, you can use those on your opening too. And then also play around with what you can do with those. There's a lot you can do now with online mock trial. You can make cool demos. I would have loved to have seen some demos for the experts. I think that would help a lot. I'd love to see people do cool things with the exhibits and maybe blow them up or highlight specific portions or tie various exhibits together visually. And I think all of that could really help keep the judge's attention and explain visually how your story fits together. I've been talking for a while, so I will be quiet. And I want to take a picture of your email so I can send you notes. But great job, everyone. This was a great trial.
Yeah, great job, guys. Good luck with the rest of your rounds.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.